When every human support disappears, when no friend answers and no door opens, a man discovers a truth most people never learn. If he still has God, he has not lost everything. Sometimes being left with no one but God is not abandonment, it is preparation. The night Daniel lost his final piece of land, he did not shout, and he did not cry. He simply stood outside his small house and watched the wind move through the empty fields. A few months earlier, those fields had been full of crops, full of promise, full of people who called him brother. Now they were silent. Daniel was born in a quiet village that could have existed anywhere in the world. The houses were simple, the roads dusty, and the people deeply connected to one another. In that village, your worth was measured not by your words, but by your reliability. If you stood by others, they stood by you. Daniel believed in that deeply. He worked hard from childhood. He cared for his widowed mother, helped neighbors during harvest, lent tools without keeping record, and never missed a community gathering. He believed loyalty created security. If he was good to people, people would be good to him. For many years, that belief seemed true. When his crops flourished, neighbors celebrated. When his harvest exceeded expectations, others praised his dedication. Daniel slowly expanded his land, built a modest home, and earned respect. He felt secure, not because of his money, but because he believed he belonged. But belonging built on people can shift without warning. A season of unexpected drought hit the village. Crops began to fail across the region. Daniel, confident and determined, took a risk. He borrowed heavily to install an advanced irrigation system recommended by a traveling businessman who promised quick returns. Some villagers warned him, others quietly hoped he would fail. The system malfunctioned. The promised support never came. The debt remained. Within months, Daniel's savings vanished. Creditors demanded repayment. The same neighbors who once praised his ambition now whispered that he had been arrogant. People avoided him in the marketplace. Conversations stopped when he approached. Invitations disappeared. Daniel felt the slow sting of isolation. At first, he tried to fix everything. He worked longer hours. He pleaded for extensions. He explained the situation repeatedly. But explanations grow thin when people have already decided their judgment. One by one, those he had helped stepped back. Even distant relatives refused assistance. And then came the day the council requested that he surrender most of his remaining land to cover debts. He signed the papers quietly. No one defended him. That evening, sitting alone in his nearly empty home, Daniel realized something terrifying. He had no one left. No allies, no reputation, no protection. His mind raced with anger. "After all I've done, this is how it ends?" he whispered. He expected bitterness to consume him. He expected resentment to grow. Instead, something else began. With no one left to call, he began speaking to God, not out of ritual, but out of desperation. His prayers were not polished, they were raw, sometimes angry, sometimes broken. He questioned, he argued, he confessed fear. Days passed in silence, then weeks. The village moved on without him. Daniel took small labor jobs outside the community, working in distant fields where no one knew his story. At night, alone under open skies, he would look upward and say, "If you are all I have, then teach me what that means." Gradually, something shifted inside him. He noticed how much of his confidence had come from approval, how much of his peace had depended on reputation, how much of his identity was tied to being needed by others. Now, stripped of those things, he faced himself honestly. And strangely, the loneliness became lighter. He began waking before sunrise, not to manage land he no longer owned, but to sit quietly and reflect. He started reading sacred words he had once skimmed quickly during busier days. He listened more than he spoke. He learned to sit in silence without panic. For the first time in his life, his faith was no longer a habit, it was a foundation. One afternoon, while repairing a fence for a distant farmer, a severe storm swept across the valley. Workers ran toward shelter. Daniel remained behind, securing animals and tools. Rain poured relentlessly. Thunder cracked overhead. In that moment, soaked and alone in the field, he felt something unexpected: steadiness. Not because circumstances were good, not because people had returned, but because inside him there was no longer chaos. He realized something powerful. When you lose everything that can be taken, you finally discover what cannot be taken. His peace no longer depended on people's opinions. His identity no longer depended on success. His strength no longer depended on numbers and storage. He had God, and that was enough. Months later, the village faced a harsher crisis than before. A violent frost destroyed most remaining crops. Food became scarce. Anxiety spread quickly. The same villagers who once distanced themselves now struggled. Daniel had very little, but he had prepared quietly. With discipline and patience, he had grown small reserves and stored what he could, not out of revenge, not to prove a point, out of wisdom. When hunger increased, Daniel did something that shocked everyone. He shared. No speeches, no reminders, no accusations. He distributed food quietly to families who once avoided him. Shame filled the air, but alongside it came something deeper: respect. One elder approached him and asked, "After what we did, why help us?" Daniel answered calmly, "When I had everyone, I thought I was strong. When I had no one but God, I learned I was secure. I do not give because you stood with me. I give because he did." His words spread through the village. Over time, relationships slowly repaired, not because Daniel demanded it, but because his character had changed. He was no longer dependent on community approval. Ironically, that made him a stronger pillar for the community than ever before. Years later, Daniel regained stability. Not the flashy prosperity of his earlier days, but something deeper and more durable. People sought his counsel during hardship, not because he was wealthy, but because he was steady. When young men complained about betrayal or abandonment, Daniel would tell them, "Do not fear the season when people leave. That season reveals what your foundation truly is. If your foundation is people, you will collapse when they walk away. If your foundation is God, you will stand, even alone." He no longer feared loneliness. He no longer feared rejection, because he understood something life-changing. When a man has no one but God, he is being invited to build on something unshakable. And once he builds there, no loss, no betrayal, no rejection can destroy him again. That was Daniel's true wealth. Not land, not approval, not praise, but a quiet, unbreakable strength formed in the season when he stood alone and discovered he was never truly alone.